Hello and welcome to Eastern Hills. We are so glad that you are joining us this morning. My name is Kelsey and I'm here with my friend Matt, and we're excited to have some conversations and get to know each other. And so let's do a little fun. Should we have some fun?
Get to know each other for sure.
I'm ready.
So we're going to start off the morning with a question. Our question for today is, and if you're watching online, please put your answer in the chat. If you're watching in the app, put it in the app. If you're in the room, just open up the app, put it in there for us. What is your favorite reality TV show? The question is, what is your favorite reality TV show? So, Kelsey?
There's a caveat, because I'm not going to admit it unless this is a safe space. So everyone, this is a safe space.
This room feels safe, yes.
Judgment-free zones.
Yep, hopefully that'll be true on chat too.
You get to say whatever you want and we won't judge you. So for me, it's ANTM.
ANTM.
America's Next Top Model.
Yes.
Anybody? No?
It's an older one. I think I've heard of it. I may have seen it.
Maybe you've seen all of it with me? Not with me.
Not with you, but
that would be weird.
Maybe I've seen it. It's judgment-free. That's as much as I can say. I would say mine is maybe, I don't watch a lot of reality TV or TV in general, but there's a show that I've watched on Netflix called Swamp People. It's like with the Louisiana Bayou where they hunt alligators, and it's very redneck, and I love it. That's
what happens after America's Next Top Model.
Yeah.
You go to Swamp People.
Let's see what's in the chat.
We already have some answers. I haven't heard this one yet. Say yes to the dress.
That's a good one.
Good choice.
$1 Million Listing, either LA or NYC. That reminds me, the HGTV ones where it's like two people that it's like, hey, I babysit kids, and like, hey, I work at Starbucks and our budget's $6 million. Like, those are always great.
Do you remember the one, Wife Swap?
No.
Where like wives swap and then they like take care of each other's families.
I remember hearing about it and thinking, wow, that's a terrible idea.
It was epic. It was great.
My lottery dream is what Karen said. Duck Dynasty, we haven't had that one yet.
That's true.
That's a great one.
There are some, today we're getting some new ones.
Sesame Street, does that count? Brian said Sesame Street.
I mean, they're real life people and puppets. So
that's true.
We on Facebook, we have Survivor, Amazing Race, American Ninja Warrior, and American Idol.
Ooh,
that was a lot.
American Idol. That was all one?
That was one person's answer.
Okay.
Thank you, Liz, for that. That's good.
Nice.
Ooh, extreme couponers, guys. This service is killing it. Way to go, team.
Yeah, nice.
Way to go, team. Hey, while we're here, want to make sure you know we have a one-stop shop where you can find any and all information about anything we talk about today, as well as information on anything you may want to know about. If you go to ehills.org/weekend, you can join for any of those events, and you can actually find some of these chats there. So make sure you hop on there with us.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw another one. Where'd it go? Masked Singer.
There you go.
Masked Singer. Yep.
You talked about that one the other day.
Yep.
I have to say, I'm going to throw it in here because someone might not. The other one that I discovered this weekend that I love is Dance Moms. No? 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
11 o'clock people. I'm going to introduce you to all of my horrible TV shows. You're welcome. Well, while you guys continue to drop, there's another $1 million listing. These $1 million ones are fun.
Pickers. That's the one I was trying to think of before. Pickers.
Top Shot. I don't know what these ones are either.
The Kardashians.
While we're on that, we are in the middle of a series called Get Out of the Weeds, where we're talking about the things that we think we have control over, but actually they're beginning to take control of our life. And how do we combat them? How do we deal with them? So last week we talked about fear and how fear can take over and actually rob us of today and of tomorrow. And this week we're going to jump into the conversation about gossip, which is a tough conversation because whether we like it or not, we probably all do it from time to time. So let's talk about it.
Yeah. I have a really cool story. So for the last couple weeks, Cherokee Trail, the school that's right behind us, they were using our building for advanced placement testing in high school, which is a really, really difficult test, lots of them. And something that's really cool that we were able to do, so as a family team, as well as like a staff team, we were showing up before those happened. So like the first one, I think people were showing up at like 7 a.m. And then they had them, depending on the schedule, like around 11:15 in the morning. They were handing out snacks and encouragements and like shaking kids like, wake up, you got to take a test. And so it was really great. And we actually heard some cool feedback from a student that attends Cherokee Trail, does not attend here. She just said, thank you so much that your staff was there to give us those snacks and the encouragements. I loved it. Your community seems like an amazing place. So super encouraging that we get to partner with a school in our community like that. And we get to do that because of your generosity. So thank you.
We gave away a lot of Scooby snacks. So.
Scooby snacks, Cheetos. Hot Cheetos were for some reason, like 7 a.m. hot Cheetos. So
Feels like your test is just going to be covered in hot Cheeto dust.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
it's true.
Ooh, keeping up with the Kardashians. They're on their last season. That's pretty sad.
Oh, Deadliest Catch and
That's
Ice
a good
Road
one.
Truckers. Lisa got those.
Someone said Christy Knows Best. I don't think I've seen that one. I'm going to go with it, though.
Joey said anything with Tim Gunn, bestest Project Runway.
Tim Gunn is great. We like Tim Gunn. We accept. Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining in the chat. We want to make sure that we just say a special welcome to any of you that are new, checking it out. Thank you for joining us for a little bit. We're going to ask one thing. If you can text new to the number on the screen, we want to get to know you and allow you to get to know a little bit more about us. I promise it's pretty pressure-free, but it's just an easy way to take a next step and get connected. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, and thanks for interacting. You guys are doing a great job on the chat. At the beginning of Phil's message, he's going to ask a question. So if you could help us answer it right now, that would be fantastic. The question Phil's going to ask is, where do you get your news from? So if you're watching online, drop it in the chat. If you're in the room, you can use the app. But Kelsey, can you tell everybody where you get your most important news from?
We need to re-emphasize the rule. This is a judgment-free zone. Did we all hear it? Did we?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I don't like the news because it stresses me out and makes me anxious about how the world is going. But if I am going to find the news, it's probably on Instagram through BuzzFeed News. Not BuzzFeed, that's a bunch of quizzes. This is BuzzFeed News.
Does BuzzFeed do anything else? Do they have one for like pet owners?
BuzzFeed has one for pet owners. Do I read all of those articles? Yes, because those ones make me happy, unlike the news. What about for you?
I'm pretty similar. I don't watch a ton of news, but I would say probably Twitter, because you can kind of curate all of the things that you are interested in. So yeah, help us out. Drop it in the chat. Let us know where you get your news from.
Thank you guys so much for joining us for our pre-service show. We are going to get started here in just a moment. We'll be right back.
Mercy and your So I'm sure that some of us have things in our lives that we think we have a handle on, and then they grow out of control. And the good news about that is that we have a God who is in control and can take all those burdens from us. So let's trust that and sing this together. I've carried a burden for too long on my own. I wasn't created to bear it alone. I hear your invitation to let it all go. And I see it now, I'm laying it down, and I know that I need you. I run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend. So I run to the Father again and again and again and again. Oh, oh, oh. You saw my condition, had a plan from the start. Your son for redemption, the price for my heart. Oh, I don't have a concept for that kind of love. I don't understand, I can't comprehend. All I know is I need you. I run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend. So I run to the Father again and again and again and again. My heart has been in your sight long before my first breath. Running into your arms is running to life from death. And I feel this rush deep in my chest. Your mercy is calling out, just as I am. You pull me in, and I know I need you now. So I run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend. So I run to the Father again and again. I run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart found a surgeon, my soul found a friend. So I run to the Father again and again and again and again. Oh, well, it is so wonderful to sing with you this morning. Go ahead and have a seat.
Sometimes we need that reminder that even when we fall or we aren't quite what we think we should be, we can run back to him again and again and again, and he doesn't run out of patience for us. Thank you guys so much for singing with us this morning. We are so glad you're here. Hey, if you're new, we want to make sure that you know we are excited that you're here. We also want you to know that we have Next today after this service. We are providing lunch for anyone that hasn't been to Next. Come join us, get to know some staff, get to know Eastern Hills, and you get to take a tour of the building and see all the really cool spaces that we have for you and your family. So make sure you join us after service in Lacuna, just outside and around the corner. We're glad that you're here. You know, over the last week and continuing tonight and into the next week, we've been celebrating graduation season. This is an exciting season for our seniors, for our 8th graders, for our 5th graders, for students who are ready to take that next step. And while for them, it marks the end of some accomplishments, for the rest of us, you know what it means? Summer's here. Anybody else really excited about summer? I don't know why, but this summer feels more necessary than any summer I've ever experienced before. This summer feels like a breath of fresh air. And so we want to make sure you know that you are invited to Summer at E Hills. All summer long, we're going to do events for you, for your family, for your friends to come and bounce on bounce houses or eat bratwurst or watch movies or go to camp. We have so much in store. So if you go to ehills.org/weekend, you can find out all of the details of everything we've got going on this summer. But here's the deal, it's not just for you. You see, your neighbors still need you. Your neighbors need you to reach out to them and say, join me, come have some fun. They need this summer as badly as we need this summer. So make sure you include them in that conversation. In fact, I had a student a couple weeks ago say, hey, is it okay if I invite my friend to youth group? And I was like, yes, please, of course. And I got to share the summer calendar with her, and she looked at all the events that we were doing, and she was super excited. And she said, my friend has had a really rough last year. And for just a summer, she gets to hear and see that she is seen and that she is loved. Your generosity helps make that happen. Your generosity helps other people know that they are heard and seen and that they are loved and invited into this space. So thank you so much to those of you who are a part of the team who gives generously week in and week out to let our neighborhood know that we value them. If you want to be a part of the team that gives, you can go to ehills.org/weekend and find the give button and join us in letting people know how valued they are. Thank you guys so much for joining us today, and welcome to week 2 of Get Out of the Weeds.
Well, hey everybody, good morning, welcome. So glad that you're here, whether you're with us here in the room or you're joining us online for the second part of this conversation about how to get out of the weeds in our life, these areas that feel like it's fine, it's manageable, it's under control until it isn't. Last week we talked about fear. Today we're gonna talk about one of the things that fear can kind of birth in us, which is gossip and slander. And I know that for some of you, you're like, you know what? I know people in my life like this, but this isn't really an area that I struggle with. So maybe later, you and I can get together, just the two of us, without that person around, and you can just tell me about all the ways that they're messing up. Does that sound good? And then you can admit that you're a gossip, and then we can just have this conversation, because we're all guilty of this. We all do this. We all wrestle with the words that we choose to say. So we're gonna spend some time talking about that over the next few minutes. I also wanted to let you know that this week and next week, we're gonna highlight an opportunity for some of you. Over the last week, I have had an opportunity to kind of be around and about more than usual, and more folks are around and about more than usual, and I think we're feeling a little bit more comfortable to say hello to one another. And I mean, almost every day this last week, somebody came up to me and said, "Oh, Pastor Phil," and we got to have a conversation in a parking lot or at a restaurant or, no joke, at jury duty. And somebody would say, "Hey, we weren't connected to Eastern Hills, and then over the last year, somebody shared it with us, or we saw it online, and so we started connecting. It was really helpful." Or people that have been a part of Eastern Hills for a long time and aren't quite ready to come back yet, that we're saying universally, we are so thankful that there were all these things available that we could step into, that we could continue to connect in some way. Thank you, thank you, thank you for continuing to make those investments. And I want to say thank you to those of you who give, because all of those things are possible simply because there's a group of people that believe in what we're trying to do here. That the message of Jesus is not a partisan message. It's not a message only for a select few. It's a message for everyone, that the hope and message of Jesus can change their lives. And so some of you over the course of the last year have just recently started connecting at Eastern Hills, and you give, and you go, I want to be a part of that team. And we know that over the course of the summer, sometimes we need to give attention to our intention. And so next week, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we are automatically generous. And the way we do that around here is something called recurring giving. And I'm not going to pressure anybody or ask you to do it if you're not ready. But if you go, we do have some summer plans, and I want to make sure that this thing we want to do continues to happen even when we're not here. So look for some practical steps around that next week. I just wanted to let you know it was coming. Before we get started, I'm going to pray for us. And if you've never been here before, never heard me speak, I pray kneeling. Somebody came up to me after last service, like, "Why don't you pray kneeling at the end?" And I was like, "Great question. Maybe this is like a question that's lingering for you. I don't kneel when I pray all the time in my life. I just do it before I speak, because it's an opportunity, I think, for us to realize how sacred this moment is, and for me to ask God in the quiet of my heart to say as few stupid things as possible." Would you pray with me? God, thank you. Thank you for the chance that we get, even though the gap feels so unbridgeable when we come up to conversations like this one, that we can still trust you with it. I ask that you would show up right now in the hearts in each and every one of us, that you would help us to see where there are some gaps that need you to step in and change our hearts, that our words might change too. It's in Jesus' name, amen. So at the beginning of the service, in the pre-service show, you were asked a question. You could answer it online or in the app. And the question was, where do you get your news from? And some of you guys answered online. Jay Jonas said, the Daily Bugle. Okay, is that a real thing? I'll take your word for it. Sounds like something from a comic. Heather said, I have a local news channel app in my phone that I get notifications from. There you go. And Liz said, I like Smarter News and Sharon McMahon on Instagram. There you go. So some obvious news options that we all pick, but isn't it interesting that no matter which one of those you pick or any other that are available, we know that people are sort of instantly labeling and classifying us based on our politics, based on the assumptions of what we value. And really what we've done is we've kind of normalized gossip and slander. Even before it hits our lips, we've already created a label in our head where we get to decide who we listen to and who we don't. And beyond how we think about news, we have allowed basically the idea of celebrity in our world to become a group of people that we feel totally vindicated and totally justified to gossip about them too. And you know, the problem is that we think we can gossip about the Kardashians, but then not about other people in our life. But the way it works in the human heart is once I've opened up that airlock, I do it all the time. I do it everywhere. We've created an expectation in our culture that this is normal. And even though it's not even though it's normal, it doesn't mean that it's healthy. Really, if you were with us last week, we talked about how we use fear as a mechanism to avoid difficult conversations or areas of pain in us. And this week, we're going to explore how gossip and slander can easily become a defense response to our fear. Remember, we talked about how with fear, what we do is we kind of baptize it. We don't say I'm scared. We don't say I'm afraid. We go like, I just need to be responsible. I'm just concerned. And then all of the actions that we do from that look like fear, but we've just come up with better words to describe it. We do the same thing actually with gossip and slander. But with gossip and slander, we baptize it with things like, you know what, we're just concerned. Or we're like, you know what, I have a prayer request, you know, like we do that with gossip all the time. Or maybe you go, I just need to seek wise counsel. And by that, you mean you're gonna find a couple dozen friends who also have partial information, and together, you're gonna get together and feel vindicated and justified to gossip. Now, all of those things can be done well. We can pray for each other, we can seek wise counsel, and we're gonna talk about how to do that stuff well. But let's not let's not fool ourselves into thinking this is an issue we don't struggle with just because we've come up with Christian words to cover it up. Here's the thing. We're gonna spend just a minute breaking down the definitions to some of these words, because I think for a lot of us, gossip's one of those things we're like, I couldn't define it, but I know it when I hear it. And so let me just give you a definition. I like it a lot from Rick Warren, who's a pastor in California. He says, gossip is talking about a situation with someone who is neither part of the problem nor a part of the solution. That's gossip, right? Now, how does it relate to slander? Slander's close, but it's a little bit different. Slander is when I try to hurt someone by talking about them without them. Like I have an intention in my heart to cause pain. And then how do they work together? Another pastor in California named Gavin Ortland says, gossip spreads fire, but slander sparks it, right? The way I think about it in my head is like gossip is just this gasoline everywhere in your life, and people are spreading rumors and half-truths, and then somebody wants to do harm to someone else, and so they use all of that and they just light a match with their words to create a fire that burns everybody that it touches. Because the lie, right, is that it doesn't hurt us, but what we're about to maybe discover for the first time in a long time, is that it absolutely does. Too often we disconnect our gossip from the gospel. Gossip is about proving I'm right, that I'm strong, that I get to sit in judgment of other people. But the gospel, it's about admitting that I'm wrong, that I'm weak, and that I actually deserve judgment. And when I engage in gossip, I instantly disconnect and disengage from the gospel. The gospel admits all of those things, and yet the God of the universe, in spite of those realities of our life and our soul and our destiny, says that God sent his son to take on the weight and the pain and the shame and the judgment that I deserved, that you deserved. And then he died in your and my place, that he came back from the grave, that I could turn from my way, believe and receive the gift he's made available, and follow him. And when we realize that's the hope we lean in, here's what the job assignment every Christian gets. We become reconcilers. We're supposed to be people that bring others together. We're supposed to be people that build one another up, and gossip does the opposite of that, because gossip is about being right, and the gospel is what actually makes us right. And so we're gonna talk about how antithetical these two ideas are to one another, and my hope is that it will give you a check in your spirit the next time a conversation comes up, and it won't take long, where all of a sudden somebody is talking about a situation or a person that you go, I'm not a part of the problem or the solution. I need to not be in this conversation. So we're gonna start with this idea of why we gossip. Why we gossip. You could probably point to a specific reason and give me rationalization or justification, but I think there's some bigger picture stuff that happens for all of us in gossip in general. And before we get there, wherever you're watching, if you're here in the room, you can do it on the app. Would you answer this question for me? What group were you a part of in high school? For some of you, you're like in high school now, very easy. For others of you, you're like, oh yeah, high school, that's a thing I did. Let me think back. Whatever that memory recall takes for you, drop that in to the chat. You've heard me say over the years at Eastern Hills things like, when you and I choose to sin, we choose to suffer. You've heard me say things like, when God says do, he means he designed you that way. And when he says don't, he means don't hurt yourself. And so when we continue to choose to sin, we know that the reason we do it is because in our sinful flesh, in that moment, it feels emotionally good. It feels satisfying for a moment. But the thing is, with our words, it's actually more insidious. It's actually even deeper than that. There's a book in the Hebrew scriptures, your Old Testament, called Proverbs, written by Solomon, who's one of the greatest, one of the wisest men who's ever lived. Didn't always follow his own advice, but very, very wise. And he talks a lot about our words. And in Proverbs 18, Solomon says, the words of a gossip are like choice morsels. They go down into the inner parts of the body. See, Solomon tells us that the reason we engage in gossip is that it just feels so good. It's important for us to know this, so important that Solomon actually 4 chapters later in the same book uses the exact same phrasing. Look, he uses this metaphor of choice morsels that we can still understand today. Maybe for you, you're like a sweets person. And so it doesn't matter how full you are. It doesn't matter how much you've eaten. If somebody offered you like that choice piece of chocolate, you'd be like, well, I mean, I don't want to be rude, so. For me, I'm not really a sweets person, but if somebody was like, hey, I've got this really great piece of steak, and like I just finished eating, I'm like, well, It's America, I got to eat it, For all of us, we have some category like that. And what Solomon is trying to point out is like there's this choice morsel, this thing that even if you're not hungry, you can't resist it. That's what gossip is like. But it's gonna do more damage than we think it is because it's gonna go deeper than we think it will. I remember when I was younger, I could do some things that I can't do now. One of those was late at night when I was in late high school and early college, a friend of mine named Bob and I would be hanging out, doing whatever, and it'd be like 1:30. And be like, hey, do you think we can get to Taco Bell before it closes? Because Taco Bell closed at 2 a.m. And if you're like, why did you eat Taco Bell, period, let alone at 1:30 in the morning? Because I was stupid. And so I would go eat it, and I felt fine. Like I went to bed, everything felt great, next day, good to go. I cannot do that anymore. And actually sometimes like late at night, there's still this weird, I don't really even like fast food now, but there's this time that like late at night where I'll get out of a meeting or whatever, and I'm like, you know what feels good? Like I just wanna go grab a cheeseburger. I wanna go get fast food somewhere. And so every now and then I will succumb to that temptation and I will go get it. And in the moment, it tastes amazing. Until it doesn't. And then all of a sudden I find myself for hours that night and my body is just like, why are you so stupid? Like you are not 18 years old anymore. Like you can't do that stuff. I'm not built for that, And I just think that's how gossip works too. In the moment it feels so good. Like what harm is really this going to do? But I'm telling you, it goes deeper into your soul than you realize it does. And it causes greater damage once it's there than you ever signed up for. And we constantly take the choice morsels of gossip from other people in our lives and we just consume them, hoping they won't do the damage that secretly we know they will. A few minutes ago, I asked you the question, what group were you a part of in high school? Pam said sorority and young life. That's cool. And then Catherine says the nerds. Well, it's like the era of the nerds now. That's totally fine, right? Look, no matter what group you selected in high school, maybe you're in high school right now and I'm about to say this and you're like, I'm more complicated than that. I'm sure you are. But one of the reasons that we pick groups at different points in our life is because we're not totally sure who we are yet. And so we feel like if we can find a group of people and associate with them and they've already got kind of a label attached, then maybe people won't look as hard to find out who we are because we're not sure yet either. And I would argue, actually, that's why we do what we do sometimes in gossip as well. There are people you go to intentionally to spread gossip with because you know that they will bite into whatever it is you're about to talk about. They agree with you. They're not gonna challenge you. And then there's other stuff that you're gonna bring to someone else because you know their political affiliation or you know what they think about a particular person. We are very sophisticated in the way we sin about gossip. We know who to bring it to and how to bring it to them so that we won't be challenged. But here's the truth, whether you want to believe it or not. Gossip is never about what someone else has done or not done. Gossip is always about what is undone in you and undone in me. There is something that we are running from. There is a fear we don't want to deal with. So I just wonder for you, what brokenness, weakness, or fear are you using gossip to deflect? We all do it. Over the course of the last year, I've already told you, God has been so incredibly faithful to us. We are so thankful for that, to be able to watch the way we've been able to care for so many more people and to connect with so many people online and to be able to resume in-person gatherings. Like, we are so glad for all those things, but it's not been a perfect year. And so there are times over the last year where someone will bring me difficult news or something challenging that we have to figure out. And in the midst of hearing it, here's what I'm ready to do. I am ready when they bring that to me. I have like on the tip of my tongue another church that's in a worse situation about something similar. And so they go, what do we need to do? I go, well, this is challenging, but have you heard about? That's gossip. I mean, it's pastoral gossip, but it's gossip. And you know why I do it? Because I'm scared. Because I've never been a pastor through a global pandemic before. Because the challenges that we face and those types of observations, they feel like judgment. Because here's a little extra bonus for you. When you're not in a healthy place, other people's observations will always feel like judgments. And so rather than being honest about how I feel, I just deflect. That's what we do. That's why we use gossip. That's why we slander, because we don't want to be honest about ourselves. Because gossip is about being right, showing ourselves as being correct and strong. And the gospel makes us right, that we can actually take a step back and go, the most important thing is that I'm a reconciler, that God's given me this new identity. How do I live that out? It's so critically important. So there's a little bit of, kind of why we gossip. The next thing we're gonna look at is why it matters. Why it matters. This matters a lot, even though we have a tendency to not think that it does. We have a tendency to minimize gossip and slander basically for two main reasons. Number one, everybody does it and it feels weird if I don't. And I will admit to you, it is weird. Like even just having this conversation right now, later on, probably today, certainly early this week, you're gonna be in a conversation and you will have your radar up in a way you haven't before, and you're gonna realize how ever present this is in your life. And then number two, we also feel like it doesn't hurt anyone. Like, is it really hurting anybody? I mean, we're not even talking to that person. We're just talking about them, without them. Well, I've told you this before, but over the last year, I've reflected back on ministry, and I've been doing this for more than 20 years. And if I took the gossip, slander, trauma, vitriol, anger of the first 20 years in ministry, and I loaded it up, it would still be less than what I've experienced in the last 12 months. The lies, the pain, the intentional manipulation and hurt that has been directed at me, my family, our church, and people that I love. If you think that gossip and slander doesn't hurt anybody, you're not just lying to other people, you're lying to yourself. And it's time to stop. Because we have all had this happen to us too. You've had somebody lie about you. You've had somebody gossip about you, and you've watched it destroy relationships. You can't control everybody else, but you can control you. You can control the conversations that happen in your airspace, and you have to decide if you will or not. You have to decide if you will stop lying to yourself and to others. Because here's the thing, when you and I engage in gossip, it hurts us, it hurts the person we're gossiping with, and it hurts the people we're gossiping about. It is scorched earth of relationships. And it matters not only because of these assumptions that we make and the kind of lies that we buy into, but we're gonna look at this letter from James, who's Jesus' half-brother, didn't believe that his half-brother Jesus was the Messiah till after Jesus came back from the dead. And he writes this letter talking about our words in one portion. And so in James 1:26, he says, if anyone thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless. What is James saying? James is asking you and me the question, right? How many of us believe that we are good in our connection to God and that our faith really matters and that it's really changing our lives, but our words are hurtful and undisciplined? I just wonder, right? James says that if that's you and me, we're just fooling ourselves. We're convincing ourselves that our faith matters, but our faith doesn't really matter. And I just wonder for you, are your words bankrupting your faith? And if you can't see it clearly for you, I bet you can think of somebody in your head right now that you can think of that you go like, well, there's somebody in my life I want to know God, but I'm not gonna have them talk with this person because this person gossips and slanders and just is reckless with their words. And so I don't want them to have that impression that this is what a follower of Jesus looks like. And James is just saying like, yeah, but the standard, right, is not the standard of who's worse than you. The standard, as we're gonna see in a minute, is much more challenging than that. Because here's the thing, what you say behind closed doors is what you really believe in the quiet of your heart. We know that what James is saying is true. We can kind of feel it. But Jesus tells us why it's true. In Luke chapter 6, Jesus says, the good person out of the good treasure of his heart produces good. And the evil person out of the evil treasure produces evil. For out of the abundance of the heart, his mouth speaks. We ask you this question a lot. What is the fruit that your life is producing? Jesus says if you have good roots, you'll have good fruits. And when you have bad fruits, you will have, or bad roots, you will have bad fruits. And it's easy to justify, it's easy to rationalize, it's easy to say, well, that's just the kind of home that I grew up in, that's just the industry that I'm a part of, that's just how I talk sometimes. But James says, no, like if you really want this faith to matter, it's gotta affect your words. What Jesus says is what your words are is really important because they're flowing from your heart. Jesus points to the fact that it's actually out of the overflow of our heart that our mouth speaks. You may think it's no big deal, but the reason that your words matter to God is because your heart matters to God. And as much as you want to disconnect those things and say, no, that's not my heart, that's not really in me, yes, it is. Jesus says that's where it came from in the first place. You may want to blame somebody else, but even though in the moment it feels so easy to show yourself strong or to make yourself right, I'm telling you, it's opposite of what God has for you. Because gossip is about being right. But the gospel makes us right. And you get to decide which one of those are you going to lean into. And then lastly, we're gonna look at how we change. How we change. And it's gonna be harder than you and I want it to be honest. And remember, we don't work for God's love and approval, we work from God's love and approval. But we are still going to have to work, and it's going to be really, really challenging. The Apostle Paul, who's a church planter in the first century, is writing to this church at Ephesus, where his friend and protege Timothy is a pastor. And in this section, he writes one of the most difficult, most challenging sections about how we think about our words that we have in the entire Bible. He says, let no unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. You know, we are all constantly trying to figure out what is like the edge, right? Like how close can I get to the thing I really want to do, but I know God doesn't want me to do, and God and I are still okay. But what Paul says is like, stop looking for the edge. The question really is about whether or not our words are building up or tearing down. And we all want there to be a third category. We all want there to be another option, but there is no other option. Building up or tearing down, that's it. And Paul's point is that our words should actually be a blessing. They should be a benefit to people who hear us. They should help. And it doesn't mean that it's all rainbows and unicorns. It doesn't mean you never have a difficult conversation. It just means when you have a difficult conversation, you have it with someone, not about someone. He goes on to say that when we speak with gossip and slander, when we try to hurt people, when we spread misinformation, it actually grieves the Holy Spirit of God. And maybe you don't know this, but if you're a follower of Jesus, the Holy Spirit of God lives inside of you. And the Holy Spirit of God gets a front row seat to the decisions that you and I make. And Paul says that when he sees and hears you and me spread lies, gossip, and slander, it grieves him. And you know, we can wiggle out of some of how we speak, like all of us do it. If you've been a Christian for a long time, again, we can all come up with good phrases. We can all go, you know, like, yeah, I need to pray about brother so-and-so. I need to pray about sister so-and-so. Oh, have you heard what's going on? Oh, yeah, we need to pray about this. Tell me more details. Gossip. Oh, you know what? I'm going around, I'm talking to a bunch of people about this situation. I'm just seeking wise counsel. You're gossiping. And I know that it's unpopular, but what Paul gives us here is something so much more challenging than even those little things we get to wiggle out of, right? He holds the mirror up to say, are your words wholesome? Like nobody feels good about that, right? Like we don't feel good about that in the words we said today. And so we're gonna see over and over again in the scriptures that the pattern is when you have to have a difficult conversation, have it, but talk directly to people. We're given a pattern for how to do this in Matthew 18, where Jesus breaks down what you and I do when we're in conflict with other people. And as he talks about it, we're given kind of a sequence we're gonna look at. But we actually did a message series a couple years ago called My Bad. And if you wanna see a multi-week series through this passage, you can go check that out. But basically, Jesus gives us this pattern that when we're in a bad spot with somebody, here's what we do. We go privately and personally to that person directly, like have a direct one-on-one conversation. And then if that doesn't work, we bring in mediators, not 20 people who you've been gossiping about it with for months, but like a couple people who can help you listen and help this person listen. And if that doesn't work, you bring it to church leadership. And we work on it together and we pray about it together. See, these steps are the normative sequence that we're given by Jesus for how you and I show up in conflict. And most often what we do is actually none of them. We just have this growing bitterness and anger towards someone, and because we feel justified in it, we never go to them. We never bring in mediators to a conversation. We don't bring it in a healthy way to any sort of church leadership. We just gossip and slander, gossip and slander, gossip and slander. And then we're like, why do I not have quality relationships in my life? Because you are not quality in your relationships in your life. And so you're just burning through people. Conflict is inevitable. We're all sinners. We're all broken, we're all messed up, we make mistakes. It's gonna take us having direct and real conversations. So choose to have them. Now I will say this, there are times we need to jump over these. I think these steps are helpful, but for some of you, you need to have a conversation with someone and you feel like pretty scared about it. And what might be helpful is for you to take a mediator right away to have that initial conversation, especially if the conversation has been lingering for a while, but still modeling having a direct conversation. And then I would say for some of you, this has unfortunately been a pattern in the kind of big C church universal for a long time. I grew up in a home with an abusive father, and my mom was at a church where I'm sure she received the advice at times, hey, you need to go talk to him directly, kind of work it out with him, and then we'll kind of climb up the ladder of Matthew 18. And I would just say, if you are not in a position where you feel safe, come talk to me. Come talk to staff, come talk to somebody at Eastern Hills, and let us help work with you through whatever you are going through. And we are legally obligated to be mandatory reporters as a church. And so what that means is if your life's in danger or someone else's life's in danger, we're gonna report it and get help. And we don't just do that because it's legally required. We do it because we think it's the right thing to do. But it's still in this sequence. We're just jumping a couple steps when that's the case for you. Because what I don't want you to hear is there's somebody that's abusing you in your life. You should go have a direct, personal, and private conversation with them. Get help. But for all of us, stop gossiping about it. Now I'm gonna give you 3 questions, and these 3 questions, it's going to feel tempting to go I'll just do these forever. And fantastic, that's my hope. But you're gonna need Jesus to show you the gap between where you are and where he wants you to be. And it's gonna take some baby steps from here to there. So here's the framing of it. I'm gonna challenge you to do this for one day this week. Pick a 24-hour period over the course of the next week and do these things for that one day. Maybe you put it on a note card, maybe it's on your hand, maybe it's on a mirror, maybe it's your phone lock screen, whatever you do. Ask yourself these 3 questions for 24 hours this week. Question number 1, are my words building people up or tearing them down? And again, we all want a third option. We're like, what about, are my words just not doing any harm? They're either building people up or tearing them down. And all of us should say, hey, everything I say I want to be true, but in discernment and discretion, not everything that's true needs to be said. And so as you think about this, are your words building people up? It's not enough to go, yeah, well, it's true, yeah, but are you building people up or tearing them down? Number 2, am I violating someone's trust or privacy? I know that it's easy for all of us in our head right now to justify and go, no, I just need to vent sometimes. I just need a sounding board. Did you know that God is listening? God can be your sounding board. He wants to give you wisdom. He says that if you'll ask for it, he'll give it to you. But how many of us just sort of skip right over God and we go talk to other people? I would just say this, if you need to have a conversation, if you need to seek wise counsel, let me give you a couple parameters. 1 person, 1 conversation. And then after that, go have the face-to-face conversation with the person. And if you need to bring in that person to have a mediator, fantastic, do that. And remove as much of the sensitive confidential information as possible. So instead of, did you hear so-and-so did such and such? What do you think about that? Say, hey, can I get your counsel? What would you do if someone in your life, their spouse didn't know this about them, but I did? How do I approach that person and have a kind, truthful conversation about what I know? And then go have it. Next, am I promoting gossip by permitting it around me? This one is gonna hurt because I have heard lots of Christians that should know better but don't do better, and they say things like this, yeah, but Phil, people just bring me these things. People just feel comfortable sharing this with me. Do you know why? Because you tolerate sinful gossip around you in conversation. Here's the thing, you have to ask yourself, do people come to you because they feel safe to sit with you or because they feel safe to sin with you? Proverbs 17:4 says that wrongdoers eagerly listen to gossip, that liars are attentive to slander. And so it's easy to be like, well, I'm not doing it. Yeah, but are you permitting it? Because what you permit, you promote. And you create relational ecosystems in your life where people all of a sudden feel justified not to have direct, honest, real conversations, but to gossip. And sometimes it's easy to rationalize. But are you promoting gossip by permitting it around you? I just wonder, what if we got caught building people up? What if like somebody walked into the room and they saw that you were having a conversation with somebody and you're like, oh, I'm so sorry. We were just talking about you because, I don't know if you know this or not, but like, everybody here at the company, they're working pretty hard, but here's the reputation you have that like when you need to do something, you get it done like nobody else at the company. We're like tremendously thankful for you. Or your kid walks in the room and you're talking with your spouse and you're like, oh, hey buddy, good to see you. We were actually just talking about how thankful we are to see what God is doing and growing in you over the last couple months. We have seen it, we've noticed, we're so thankful for you. What if the way that we talked about people without people was positive? And then when we had difficult, challenging conversations, shocker, we just talked to them about it. Because talking about them without them, it's hurting you, it's hurting them, and it's hurting everyone you talk to about it. Here's the thing, we gossip out of a fear that we aren't in control and that people will see our weakness, so we point out others' weakness instead. The gospel says freely, I'm weak, that Jesus' strength in me and through me is the hope for life. As a matter of fact, Paul tells us that it's actually our weakness where God's strength is perfected. It's being honest about what we're going through and what we're feeling and where we're falling short. Because here's the thing, if you choose to be a follower of Jesus, you give up the right, you surrender the right to be right with issues and wrong with people. And what gossip says is I'm gonna be right with this issue and wrong with this person and justify it. God does not give us that path. I just wonder, what would it look like in Southeast Aurora? What would it look like in Parker? What would it look like in Denver Metro and in Colorado if the church, if followers of Jesus were as good at and as committed to sharing the gospel as we are the gossip? I think it would change things. I think it would look different. I think our relationships would look different. I think our communities would be more attractive. But unfortunately, too often people come in and see that we've set the bar not for the gospel, but for gossip. So I've got a question for you, but it's not like a think about it question. It's like a do something about it question. Who do you need to have a direct conversation with this week? Not sometime in the future, not gossip about it for a few more weeks or months. Some of you have conversations that have been brewing for years. And I'm telling you, God's challenging you to have the conversation directly this week. And so there's different types of people. The first type of person is someone who has brought gossip to you. Someone who's brought gossip to you. And in case you don't know this, if someone's willing to bring gossip to you, they will gossip about you. And so if there's somebody in your life that you're like, oh, I just love that I get to be on the in crowd. I love that they bring me stuff. Yeah. They're not just bringing stuff to you. They're bringing stuff from your conversation to other people too. And here's some questions to maybe ask them in your conversation as gossip is brought to you. Maybe based on personality, you'll feel more comfortable with one of these than the other. But here's one question. When somebody starts talking gossip to you, ask, what did they say when you brought this up to them? Like, oh, I actually haven't talked to them about it. Oh, maybe you should. Or, have you had a chance to talk to them about this? And if you feel comfortable, just say, I'd be willing to go with you, but like we should talk about this with them, not about them. And then a question that may be really hard for you to ask, but I think is really important is, why are you telling me this? Because here's what we know sociologically. Most of the time, they actually don't know the answer to that question. I mean, it's coming from fear and insecurity at a big level, but like they don't always know. And just asking the question, why do I need to know this? Why are you sharing this with me? Could be an invitation to a level of honesty in your relationship that can really change things. Second is someone you have gossiped about. This is not fun, but it's necessary. Number one, confess. Proverbs 28:13 says, whoever conceals their sins does not prosper, but the one who confesses and renounces them finds mercy. I know it's not fun. I know none of us want to do this. We want to live like we're perfect and that we've never made a mistake. But you've got to confess. And you may be surprised how often you get mercy back in exchange. And then second, learn. Proverbs 18:17 says, in a lawsuit, the first person to speak seems right until someone comes forward and cross-examines. Ask them the rest of the story. Let them tell you. Maybe they're not ready to right in that moment, right after you confess what you've been saying or what you've been thinking about them, but like at some point, really hear them out. Also, someone you've gossiped with. This is hard, right? Because our relationships, sometimes we just have people that we know, oh, that's that person that when we get together, I know we're gonna talk about other people, and it's sort of okay, and we don't call each other out on it. And so this week, you're gonna have to say, hey, you know what? I know this has kind of been a part of our relationship, but I feel like God's really working on it in my life right now. So would you do me a favor? If I start talking about somebody that's not here poorly, would you call me out on it? And it would be okay if like when you did that, I just kind of let you know I don't want to talk about, you got to set some new ground rules in those relationships if you want it to really be different. And then someone who's gossiped about you. And this one's hard because in this space that we live, right, there's these challenges of, there's like the person who's gossiped about you, without you, who slandered you, and like you know sometimes what they said, and they know that you know what they said, but both of you pretend when you're around one another that you don't know, that each other know. That feels like it's working out great, right? No, you gotta have a direct conversation. Titus 3 says, warn a divisive person once, and then warn them a second time. And after that, have nothing to do with them. You may be sure that such people are warped and sinful. They are self-condemned. Not only are you allowed to have boundaries in relationships, you're actually supposed to. And some of you have never had a conversation like this. You have never created a barrier where you've said, look, I wanna know you, I wanna be friends with you, but this has to change in order for us to have a healthy friendship. And so until you're ready, we talked about this a couple times, I'm gonna separate. And when you're ready, let's have a conversation. Let's come back into relationship. You may be surprised how much healthier your relationships get when you allow yourself to have boundaries with people. Look, I know this is a lot, and I know that it's challenging. But I hope that wherever your head's at about this, here's what I hope you can do. There's a word in the New Testament that we see show up a lot, and the word is repent. That I would turn from one way that I was going, that I was living, that I thought was the right way, and I would go a different way. And we're gonna sing a song called Build My Life in just a minute. And as we do, I would just challenge you that as you sing this song, sing it with a repentant heart to say, God, you know what? I don't wanna speak death in relationships in my life. I wanna speak life. I wanna build people up. I don't wanna violate privacy and confidence. I don't wanna create a place where I'm promoting gossip around me because of what I tolerate in the circles that I run in. Decide right here, right now, that you're gonna let God invade this space of your life, because you will be surprised at how much more time and energy and focus you have when you start directing it to the places and people God's called you to have it. Can I pray for you? God, none of us are without sin. None of us have a clean record on never speaking ill of someone or never getting involved in something we're not a part of the problem or the solution of. We've all done this. We all do this, God. And I ask that you would just reveal in us the gap that you want to bridge with the gospel, that we could be reconcilers, not people who continue to divide. Help us, God, as we sing these words, to see your face and to trust you fresh. With all these things we think this needs to change and how will it happen if I don't? God, we can trust you with it. I pray that we would. In Jesus' name, amen. If you're in the room with us, would you stand and sing?
Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder Please help us to keep these words in our heart today. I will build my life. I will build my life on the rock. Change me. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken.
As you head into this week, find those 24 hours. Those 24 hours where we're gonna break the rhythms that the world tells us are normal about gossip and say, I'm going to speak well, I'm going to listen well, and ultimately, I'm going to love well. Let's live differently together. Thank you guys so much for being here. We'll see you back soon.